لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا المصطفى صلى الله عليه وعلى آله ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى. صدق الله العظيم. Inshallah, from this week we will be starting a program of the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a compilation which is made by Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi. This compilation is known as the 40 Hadith of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, and inshallah we'll have this every Friday after Isha Salah. And before we start, just a little introduction of a Hadith, why we learn a Hadith, and what does a Hadith mean, and what is the purpose of learning a Hadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. That say if you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, say if you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, speak out to the people and say to them, that if you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاتَّبِعُونِي, then follow me, then follow the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Forget about you loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yuhbibkum Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn around and He will love you. That you came out to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in return you get something that is even better. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will love you. And the only way that we can love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to love anybody in this world, it is mandatory that you get to know that person. Without knowing that person, it is impossible that you love the person truly. And to love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we have to study the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the word Hadith, the definition of the word Hadith, it can be defined as a conversation, a report, a news. But Muhaddithin, they classify Hadith, they translate Hadith as anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did, anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, or he saw somebody doing but he did not stop them. So he approved of it. They also said that this goes the same with the Sahaba Tajma'in and the Tabi'in, the people that followed the Sahaba Tajma'in, that were alive during the life of the Sahaba Tajma'in. So anything that the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did, said, or he okayed, the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, this is classified as a Hadith. Now, what is the ruling of a Hadith in Islam? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah Najm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam does not say anything out of his own will. He does anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says is not from himself. Meaning when you and I, when we conversate, when we talk, some of the stuff that we say is from ourselves, some of the stuff that it comes from us. And commonly you hear a speaker saying that anything good that I have said is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything wrong that I have said is from me and is from the shaitan. But anything Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reinforces and says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, that nothing is from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, nothing is from himself, but إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. That it is actually a wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there are two types of wahi. There are two types of revelation. The first type of revelation is called wahiyya matlu. Wahiyya matlu is that wahi, that revelation that will be recited. For instance, we recite the Quran in Salah, we recite the Quran for reward, we recite the Quran at different times of the day. And then you have wahiyya ghayr matlu. That wahi, that revelation that will not be recited. And this is the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that it is also wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but yet we will not recite it in salah, we will not recite it outside. But however, there is a reward for reciting the Hadith and passing on the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In one Hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, whoever learns a minimum of 2 Hadith, at least 2 Hadith, just 2 Hadith, and he learns it to benefit himself, or he then teaches it to somebody else to benefit them and their religion. He says this is better than worshipping for 60 years. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you learn just 2 hadiths, and you learn it why? So you can benefit your own religion, or you pass it on to somebody else. So inshallah we'll be learning 40 hadiths, but just 2 hadiths Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says this is better than the ibadah of 60 years. Right? So reading the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, again, it is a guide for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا, that we have revealed the Quran, and after revealing the Quran, we have taken upon ourselves to then explain it. Right? There are so many facts, so many issues that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, but there is no details of these issues. For instance, you have the Fajr Salah. It's something very basic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of the Fajr Salah that you have to pray at Duha time and before, and when the sunlight comes out. But in the Quran, there's nothing that says that you pray 2 rakat sunnah, and then you pray 2 rakat farz. Or in Zuhr, you pray 12 rakats, and then Asr 8 rakats, and then Maghrib 7 rakats, and then Isha 17 rakats. This again in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala touches each of these subjects, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the same time says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا, that we will mention these subjects, and then to explain these subjects, that is upon us as well. That the explanation of the Quran, that is upon us as well, and that is to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In another place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, that we have revealed the Quran, and then it is up to us to protect it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the previous books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this responsibility Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not take. But when it came to the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the responsibility that one, that we have revealed it, and after revealing it is then now our responsibility that we will take care of the Quran. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He fulfills that responsibility through insan. So He fulfills the responsibility of taking care of the Quran through insan, by making us, by making the Quran easy for us to learn and memorize. And that is why, any corner in the world that you go, you'll find people that memorize the Quran, from the kids that are, 4 or 5 years old. They start memorizing the Quran, even younger we have our kids, reading, Qul Allahu Ahad, Qul Allahu Ahad, Qul Allahu Ahad. I remember my mother who reverted to Islam. She wasn't born Muslim, but one of the first things that she taught me was Inna A'tainaka al-Kawthar. This was the only surah that she knew. And whatever knowledge she had for the Quran, as a young boy, I remember that she made me memorize this surah, and that's where my journey of memorizing and being a part of Inna nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu hafidhun, it started. But where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes it, where He will protect the Quran, He also has to protect the explanation of the Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا, that it is up to us to explain it. So if we are going to take care of the actual text of the Quran, then we must also take care of the explanation of the Quran. And the explanation of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care by the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the sanad, and this is something that is very unique about Islam. Commonly we have pride over things that have nothing, that we had no say. We'll say that I'm from this part of the world, I'm from that part of the world, or in my part of the world we have pride over these small things, right? That I'm Indian, or I'm Pakistani, or I'm Arab, or I'm this, and we had no say in this, right? Or I'm from this family, I'm a Khan, or I'm a Chaudhry. These things, we have pride in these small things. But something that every Muslim should have pride in is our heritage. The Islamic heritage. Our roots go so deep, and they are so strong. Whether it comes from the Quran, the strength that lies in the Quran, that 1400 years, and it has not been changed. A single little dot has not been changed in the Quran. Or you talk about the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is preserved in such a beautiful way that every person who narrates a hadith, every person that narrates a hadith, and even when we started our final year of our autumn course, the teacher, he actually sat us down and he said that I am Sheikh Yusuf Mutala. I am Yusuf Mutala, and I studied the hadith from Sheikh Zakaria Kandari Rahmatullah alayhi. And he started from there, from himself, and then he went to Sheikh Zakaria, and then he went to his teacher, all the way to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is what you call a sanad. A sanad is a chain of narrators. And every single hadith that we have of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it also comes with a chain of narrators. Right? Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi, we commonly hear these names. Why do we hear the name of Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi, and Imam Dawud, Imam Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi? Because each one of these great scholars, before taking a hadith and putting it into the book, they first did research of the sanad. How many people are in the sanad? How many, and who are these people? And they go into so much detail for the muhaddithin to take one hadith from a certain person. They first do research on that person. Who is this person? What kind of characteristics does he have? How does he deal with other people? Forget about how does he deal with other people, but how does he deal with animals? And there's one muhaddis, he went to get a hadith from a scholar. He heard that there's a scholar in a faraway country, and he traveled to get this hadith from this one scholar. And when he reached there, he saw that the scholar, he was calling a camel. And he put his hand out to the camel as if he had some food, calling, how we do to kids, we'll put our hands out, I have a chocolate, I have some candy, I'll give to you. And when the kid comes, nothing. Right? So he was watching, and the scholar was calling this camel, and when the camel came to him, he had nothing in his hand. And this muhaddis, instead of staying and talking to this person, he turned around and he left. Why? Because this person, if he can fool a camel, then he can fool me. And it is not right to take a hadith from this person. There was another muhaddis, he traveled he traveled for a single hadith, and when he got there, he missed the shaykh. The shaykh had already left. So the person that was there, he said that the shaykh was right here, and he prayed his salah right here. Right? But he went that way. If you go that way, you'll be able to catch up to the shaykh. So this muhaddis, he looks at the ground where the shaykh was praying salah, and instead of going after the shaykh, he turns around and he goes back. And the person that was standing there, he calls him, like, where are you going? I thought you wanted to look for that shaykh. That shaykh, he just left. Just if you go fast, you'll find him. He said, I'm looking at the place where the shaykh prayed salah, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he instructed us that when we go into sajda, we keep our fingers closed. And in the sand, I see this person's fingerprints, and his fingers are open. This person does not follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he went back. Right? So every single hadith that we gain from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it comes with a very, very strong chain, where the muhaddis, they look into very small details about every single person in the sanad of the hadith. As Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, if you look at through the hadith, the books of hadith, you'll find very few hadiths from Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. If you look at Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he accepted Islam much later. And Abu Bakr, he accepted Islam all the way in the beginning. And Abu Bakr, he spent so much time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was always with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the point that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated from Makkah to Medina, for a long period of time, he was the only person with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There were other people in the migration as well, that the guys that helped them through the paths. But for a long period of the migration, it was only Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. Then the question is, why do we not hear the name of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, and when we read the hadith? Why is it that we hear the name of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala over and over and over? Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, in one hadith, there's a mention that Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he actually had a collection around 4,000 hadiths. 4,000 hadiths. But when he heard the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whoever ties a lie onto me, basically says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not say that, and he does this on purpose. Right? فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ فِي النَّارِ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that person has just prepared his place in Jahannam. So Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, when he heard this hadith, he said, I'm better off burning this. And he burned his collection of 4,000 hadiths, saying that I do not want to be questioned about some link or anything regarding these hadiths, and he burned his collection of hadiths. And this is how the hadith was preserved. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, he had traveled to a different country. He traveled to a different country in search of a hadith that he already had. So he already had this hadith, but he had heard it from somebody else, who heard it from somebody else, who heard it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there he traveled to a person who heard it directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So why is he traveling? He's not traveling for the hadith, he already has hadith. But he's just cutting one of the links out in the chain. So the hadith is even more firm and more solid. So instead of there being 3 narrators in between, there is just 1 narrator in between. And he travels, the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he travels, and once he gets there, he waits outside. And this person, after he comes out of his house, he sees the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he gets upset that, as Abdullah ibn Abbas, you should have told me, I would have came to you, right? You should have called for me, I would have came to you. Or once you got here, you could have woken me up, right? Or I would have came out. Abdullah ibn Abbas tells this person that, look, the person, the one who's in need is me. Right? You're not in need, I'm in need. That's what I will need. And this is how the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was preserved. Now, the question we have here, that this book of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi is a 40 hadith. Why are we learning, why this number of 40 hadith? In one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever learns 40 ahadith to benefit his deen, once again, to benefit his deen, then on the day of judgment, and this hadith is narrated by Abu Hurairah and Abu Darda, Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abu Darda, Abdullah ibn Abbas narrates this hadith, and Abu Darda narrates this hadith, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever learns 40 hadiths to benefit his deen, or then he teaches somebody else, then on the day of judgment, I will testify on his behalf. I will intercede upon his behalf. That on the day of judgment, when this person is standing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will be me that will speak up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I will make sure this person goes to Jannah. Another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, very close meaning of hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that this person who learns these 40 hadiths, he will be with the scholars and the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send his scholars and his slaves to Jannah, and this person will be with the scholars and the slaves. So to have to become a scholar, is something that that we strive for. Something to a person is always in the state of learning knowledge. To become a scholar is something that we always strive for. But here is it's a very shortcut. We live in the 21st century where everything's shortcut. Everything is like eBay. That you place the bid, you place the auction, you have it on your door the next day. Right? So here we were looking for the quick way. The quick way to become a scholar, the quick way to be resurrected with the scholars. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that you want to learn 40 hadiths. Learn 40 hadiths, but not only that, implement it in your life and then pass it on to somebody else. And the reason why Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he gathers these 40 hadiths, right? Now Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, inshallah we'll talk about the other books that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi wrote, and the book of 40 hadiths is a very small book. Compared to other books that Imam Nawawi wrote, there's one book that Imam Nawawi wrote that had actually 30 volumes. 30 volumes of one book. But this book of 40 hadiths, the reason why Imam Nawawi he compiles only these 40 hadiths, that Imam Nawawi says, the reason why I compiled these 40 hadiths, that if a person follows these 40 hadiths, this will complete his religion. And this is why we have chosen this book of 40 hadiths. Right? That when any compilation of 40 hadiths will have different topics, will have completely different topics. And as we'll go through this journey of learning these 40 hadiths, you'll see that first day we'll talk about a person's niyat, then we'll talk about a person's his Islam, his Iman, his Ihsan, and we'll talk about the day of judgment, and then we'll move on, and each hadith will bring a different aspect to your life that if you were to follow upon just these 40 hadiths, then this will be enough to complete your religion. Right? And this is why we study the 40 hadiths through this hadith of Rasulullah, through these 2 hadiths of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Wajabat that it is mandatory upon me to intercede on this person's behalf, and at the same time this person will be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect this person on the day of judgment with the scholars and the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And at the same time, the reason why Imam Nawawi compiled these 40 hadiths, because of the different topics that these 40 hadiths they compensate, and if a person were to follow just these 40 hadiths, then this would be enough for this person to enter Jannah, and it will also be enough to complete his deen. Now, a little bit about Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi. Right? Before we start the book, it is important that we learn about the author of the book. Who wrote this book? Of course, any book of hadith, the author of the book is of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because as we said, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, the words are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they're being spoken by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the compiler of this hadith is Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi. And Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, his real name is Yahya bin Sharaf. Yahya bin Sharaf. And the reason why he was known as Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, because he was born in a town called Nawa. He was born in a town called Nawa, and he was known as Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi. Later on, he was also known as Abu Zakaria Muhyiddin. Abu Zakaria Muhyiddin. Now, those of you that know a little bit about the Arabs, they usually had a nickname based on their children's name. So, for instance, Imran Bhai here, he would be known as Abu Harun or Abu Hisham, right? Based upon his children's name. So now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he was known as Abu Zakaria, but at the same time, another point that inshallah we'll speak about is that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he never got married. Right? Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he never got married. Inshallah we'll speak about the reasons why he didn't get married. But it is not uncommon that in the Arabs, they used to keep these names even before, they used to keep these titles even before they had a child with that name, or it would just be a laqab that they would be known as. So Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he was also known as Abu Zakaria Muhyiddin. And as the short life that he lived, he was also given the title Shaykh al-Islam. He was also given the title Shaykh al-Islam, which is a huge title. For a person to be called Shaykh al-Islam, it's like you've reached it, my friend. You've absolutely reached it to be called Shaykh al-Islam, one of the great scholars of Islam. Now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he was born during the first Ashara of Muharram in the year 631. In the year 631, he was during the first Ashara of Muharram, he was born. And at the age of 10, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he completed his hifz. At the age of 10, he completed his hifz. Now, this is a great achievement, but what is a better achievement is that he did not come from a background of scholars. Right? Now, if you have a background of scholars, they understand the importance, they understand the need to teach their children Quran, to teach children Hadith, and they start at a young age. But Imam Nawawi, he didn't, the background that he came from, he didn't come from a background of scholars, but his father was actually a merchant. He had a store. And he would get mad at Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, and he would tell his son Yahya that you need to spend time in the store. You need to spend time in the store. And Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he would tell his father, the store thing is not for me. It's not for me. And he would go and run and he would spend time with the scholars and he would start to learn. And there's also one narration that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, some of his friends, they once forced him and said that, Yahya, you never play with us. Right? We're your friends, you never play with us. Let's play some sports. And they took him out to play. Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he actually began to cry and he ran away from there. He didn't enjoy playing. He didn't enjoy wasting his time, whether it be in sports or anything. Right? He considered that I can make the most of my time in another way. And Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he studied in his small town Nawa, and this Nawa is actually close to Damascus in Syria. And he stayed there until the age of 18. So until the age of 18, he was in this small village. And at the age of 18, his father took him to Damascus. And when he went to Damascus, he actually stayed back in Damascus, and he began to study. Now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, the first school that he went to, he first enrolled there, but because that school did not have housing, he had to leave. And he went to another school, Rawahiyah. The school is called Rawahiyah, and when he went to this school, he was given a small little room. And the room that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi actually lived in, narration mentioned that it was so small that for him to sit down in this room, he would have to pile the books on top of one another. Right? The books would be spread out, and for him to just sit down, he would have to pile the books on top of one another for him to find space to sit down. Now, At the age of 18, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he began to study, and at the age of 24, he became a teacher at the school of Ashrafiyah. At the school of Ashrafiyah, he studied for 6 years in Damascus, and then he became one of the teachers there. And then, as a teacher, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he still carried on learning. Okay? As a teacher, he still carried on learning. Sheikh Ali al-Dhikr, he says that while Imam Nawawi, while he was a student, right, while he was a student, he would take 12 different classes. He would take 12 different classes. And these classes were, he would go to different shuyukh, and with one shuyukh he would learn nahu, and another shuyukh he would learn sarf, another sheikh he would learn fiqh, and then a hadith, and then different funds and different sciences of ulum al-din. And each class would be around an hour long. Each class would be around an hour long. So 12 classes, in each class around an hour long will be 12 hours. And Ali al-Dhikr, he says that the remainder 12 hours that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi had, he would revise what he learned. So 12 hours he would learn, and then the other 12 hours he would revise. And in between somewhere, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi would do, the human needs. He would eat quickly, he would sleep quickly. Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he actually says about himself, for 2 years, I never went to sleep on my side. I never laid down to go to sleep for 2 years. Meaning that while he was sitting and while he was reading and writing and learning, he would, in this state, he'll fall asleep and he'll go to sleep. Right? This was Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi. Now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, a bit more about him. His food, he would only eat once a day. He would only eat at night. And there were other great scholars as well that had this habit. Imam Sheikh Zakaria al-Khandalwi, he would only eat once a day. And even that, at one point of his life, his sister used to bring the food for him and feed him the food. Why? Because it would take too much time to prepare the food and sit down to eat the food. And people that understand the value of time, they know there are better things that they could do. So Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he would only eat once a day. And it is said that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, his father used to send him his food. That his father would send some cake and olives from Noah. From Noah, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, his father would send some cake and olives to Damascus, and Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he would eat that. And the reason why he would eat that is, he knew that this came from a halal source, a pure source. That it wasn't nobody. The money that it was used to buy these goods, they weren't from they weren't from a haram source. And this is why Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he would only eat from that much. Now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, in his personal life, he performed 2 hajj. He traveled to Bayt al-Muqaddas once, and in his final years of his life, he returned back to Noah. He returned back to his home country. And the reason why he returned back to his home country, the ruler of Damascus at that time had exiled Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi from Damascus. Why? Because whatever wrong he would do, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi would not run with it. So anything wrong that the ruler would do, this happens to us, that we live in a world that when rulers or people that are in a high position do something wrong, we just lower our head, lower our gaze, and do nothing about it. Whereas Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in one hadith, he makes mention that whoever sees something wrong happening, then he should stop it with his hands. If he cannot stop it with his hands, then he should stop it with his tongue. Then do something about it. And if you can't do something about it, then speak up. And if you can't speak up, then at least feel bad about it. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he finishes off with saying, and this is the lowest stage of iman that a person can only feel bad about it. So Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, whenever the ruler of Damascus would do something wrong, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi would always stand up to his opposition and speak up about it. And in the final years of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, his life, he was exiled from Noah, and he was sent back to he went back to his hometown. He was exiled from Damascus, and he went back to Noah. Now Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, from school of thought, he was Shafi, and he wrote some great books. Some other works of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi also include Riyadh al-Salihin. a very a compoundment from Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi's book that is well accepted. And in some parts of the world, I remember one of my teachers, he was telling us that he had met somebody in Hajj from Russia, and he was speaking to this person, and the person said that that I teach Hadith, I'm a Shaykh al-Hadith. And my teacher was telling me, I teach Hadith as well, I teach Hadith in England. And they went on this conversation, and my Shaykh went on to tell, my teacher went on to tell him that I teach from Bukhari Sharif and Muslim Sharif. And this other scholar from Russia, he says that I'm a Shaykh al-Hadith, and who we call a Shaykh al-Hadith is a person that teaches Riyadh al-Salihin. Right? So, in most parts of the world, a person called a Shaykh al-Hadith is somebody who teaches Bukhari, somebody teaches Muslim, these great books of Hadith. But there are some parts of the world that just teaching Riyadh al-Salihin, the book of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, this will qualify you as a Shaykh al-Hadith, as a master in a Hadith, as a teacher of Hadith, right? This is Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi's book. Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi also has another book called Al-Azkar, which is all about the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the importance of remembering of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how a person should remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the connection that remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala builds, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub," that the hearts gain contentment by remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He also wrote, earlier we mentioned that he had a book that had 30 volumes, Al-Mu'jamah, and the Shafi'i school of thought. So he had a book of 30 volumes about the Shafi'i school of thought, and at the end, he actually does comparing the different school of thoughts of Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi, Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi, Imam Malik rahmatullahi, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So not only was he a master in his school of thought, but he also had expertise in the other school of thoughts as well. He also has a al-Minhaj, a sharah, a explanation of Muslim Sharif, that is well accepted, al-Minhaj, and then he has other sharahs as well. But the unique thing, and the thing that will really surprise you, that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, as we said, that he started teaching at the age of 24. At the age of 24, he started teaching, and then you have these books after books after books, and the books that I've just mentioned are just few of the books that he has written. And again, to write a book, anybody who has wrote an essay for a school will know how long it takes to do a little bit of writing, right? It takes hours to write a page. But Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, he wrote, he wrote books upon books that had volumes upon volumes of commentary upon the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So imagine the time that it takes to think of this commentary and what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Right? Again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would speak, there was a uniqueness in the speech of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that uniqueness is called Jawami al-Kalim. Inshallah, we'll speak about this later on. But Jawami al-Kalim means to say very little, but to have in-depth meaning in that. Right? To have in-depth meaning there. I remember someone has told me about Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln was once asked that if you had to give a 5-minute speech, how long would it take to prepare that speech? Right? If you look at the Gettysburg Address, there is no recording of the Gettysburg Address or anything. There's no there is no record of the Gettysburg Address. There's no the videotape or recording of the Gettysburg Address. Why? Because it was so short. He says that it would take me 2 weeks to prepare a 5-minute speech. It would take me 2 weeks to prepare a 5-minute speech. Someone asked him, Abraham Lincoln, what if it was 10 minutes? He said 10 minutes, it would take me around a week. It would take me around a week. The more time you have to speak, the lesser the preparation time is. Then he was asked him, what about if you had 20 minutes? Because 20 minutes, I don't need no time. Just get up and speak and say all you want. Right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at the final sermon of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many masajid, they have the final sermon of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is no more than a page long. It is no more than a page long. Now imagine this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has a gathering of hundreds of thousands of Sahaba ajma'in, and this will be the last time that you'll have a gathering like this, and it's like a father who's going to leave his children, and this is his chance to give his final advice to his children, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he only says a little bit. But the little that he says, it has deep meaning that people that come afterwards, they write commentaries upon these meanings of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant. So Imam Nawawi He wrote, books upon books about the commentary upon the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he passed away in Noah. When he returned to Noah, so again we said that he went to Damascus at the age of 18. He started teaching at the age of 24, and he passed away back in Noah at the age of 44. So he only, he only had 20 years. 20 years as a teacher, 20 years as where he had gained enough knowledge to begin to write, and he completed all this in 20 years. And this is why Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he used his time very wisely, and he left out things that he did not find appropriate. And this is why Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he never got married. Right? Some of the reasons why he never got married, because he said I can utilize my time more for people that are to come later on. And here, this is why we're talking about Imam Nawawi, because he made this sacrifice. Again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one hadith, he does make mention that that nikah min sunnati, that nikah is from my sunnah. And this is not saying that Imam Nawawi never made it intention that that he will not get married. There's so many people that get married after the age of 44, after the age of 45, and this might have been the case in Imam Nawawi that he had the intention to do it. While I'm in my youth, let me write it as much as I can, let me study as much as I can. Then inshallah, Aram said, we are the opposite. That let me enjoy everything, and then when I become old, then I'll turn towards the religion. But Imam Nawawi, he understood that it is your youth that you spend wisely, and then in your old age you can you reap the benefits of that. So Imam Nawawi, most likely he had this intention of spending his later years of his life for more personal needs, and utilizing the earlier stages of his life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the age of 44 again is still a very young age. In today's day and age, when we hit 30 and we start feeling old. We hit 30 and we start feeling old. But there are so many mentions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, he received prophet at the age of 40. And yet there are mentions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being a youth. Right? There is the very famous story of an old lady, and whether the story, whether it comes from a strong narration or not, but there's a story of a lady leaving the city of Makkah to Mukarramah, and she's carrying her bags, and a young youth comes and says, "Let me carry your bags for you." Right? So here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is described as a young youth, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam later on in his life, in the Madani period, again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he traveled to Madinah to Munawwarah when he was 53 years old. 53 years old plus. Abu Bakr came into the room, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had his headgear moved off. Right? His hair was open. And Abu Bakr, he looked at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's head, and he saw some few strands of white hair. He saw some few strands of white hair, and he was 53 plus. And Abu Bakr jokingly said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you became old. You became old. He's 53 plus, but he only had a few strands of white hair. And he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you became old. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, Shaybat Hud wa akhwatuha. That Surah Hud and his sisters have made me old. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about being steadfast, staying on something, not backing down, doing something every day, right? Not leaving what is right. And Imam Nawawi rahmatullah, he understood this. He understood this, that spending your youth, being steadfast in your youth, and using your youth wisely is extremely important. Why? Because another hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that on the day of judgment, and this is why we gather here. The reason why we gather here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, on the day of judgment, there will be 7 people under the shade of Allah, under the shade of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The day that there will be no other shade, inshallah, we'll touch this hadith later on as well. But one of the 7 people will be a youth who spends his young age, who spends his youth like you and I, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a Friday night, and I'm sure there are so many other places that we can be, right? At a da'wat, at a party, at a wedding, at a walima, so many other places that we can be, but we choose. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Ahabbul biladi masajiduha." That the most beloved place in a town is the masjid, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we choose our Friday nights to be in the most beloved place in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? So that on the Day of Judgment, we can get a little corner under the shade of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, this is what he understood. That I have to spend my time extremely wisely. Why? Because this is my youth. Just to gain that little piece of the shade of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah, I will try to keep our class between half an hour to 45 minutes. We won't stretch it too long. My goal is that we will do inshallah one hadith per week, and through the 10 weeks, inshallah, if we finish 10 hadiths, and that's great. And then if there's time, then we'll carry on to the next 10 hadiths, and then the next hadiths. And also with this goal, one thing that I plan to do is that we will speak briefly about, inshallah, I say briefly, but when you go into the subject, it takes a lot more time, about the narrators of the hadith, right? These people that went through great sacrifice. In the first couple of hadiths are narrated by Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and for me to say that I'm going to speak briefly about Umar radiallahu ta'ala, that would be an injustice, right? That would be just absolutely wrong. But that's one of the goals that I have, that inshallah we will talk about the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We'll talk about the background of the hadith. For certain hadiths, we'll go into the shan al-wurud, why this hadith, what was the background, what happened that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said this hadith. And then inshallah we'll also talk about the person who narrates this hadith. Who this person was, how many hadiths they narrated, what kind of impact they had on, in our day and age, and even at that time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But these are inshallah some of the goals. Inshallah, again, we'll keep our class around 45 minutes to half an hour to 45 minutes, just as we will inshallah speak about the narrators of the hadith as well. But inshallah this week, I just wanted to keep this week as an introduction to hadith. What is hadith? Once again, the hadith is something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, did, or he approved of. He saw someone do it and he didn't stop them. And the muhaddithin, they write this is something that also the Sahaba or the Tabi'in did as well. And anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam itself. And this is through the verse, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. And the reason why we learn the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. If you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say if you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn around and love you. And if you want to love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then you have to know about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and find out about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the best way to find out about a person is to see what he has said and what did that person do. And it's through the hadith that we learn what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said and what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did. And it is this hadith that is a commentary of the Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا, that there are topics that we touch in the Quran, and then we will explain as well. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says that إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ حَافِظُونَ, that we have revealed the Quran and we will take care of it. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also will take care of the commentary of the Quran, which is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is through the sanad, the strong roots that we have, that each hadith comes with a chain of narrators of who said this hadith and who said this hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to which sahabi, to which tabi'in, to which tabi'in, and then all the way down to the authors of the books, of the compilers of the hadith. And we also speak Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi, the background of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi. He at the age of 10 he became a hafiz, and at the age of 18 he traveled to Damascus to further his studies. At the age of 24, he finished his studies and he began to teach. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the age of 24, and he wrote many great books. Of course, the 40 hadiths Imam Nawawi, he compiled Arbaeen of Nawawi, then he also compiled al-Salihin, Majmu'ah, Minhaj, Al-Azkar. These were great books that Imam Nawawi he gathered. Imam Nawawi he used and utilized his time so wisely that he did not get married. He would eat very little, he would sleep very little. He would spend most of his days, half of his time studying and half of his time then reviewing what he studied. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this easy for us to be amongst those people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects us amongst the scholars and servants. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us from those people that learn these 40 hadiths. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam intercedes on our behalf. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to at least learn 2 hadiths, so that we can pass it on to somebody else, and this will be better for us than 60 years of worship. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.